pay or we'll destroy it. That's how my morning started, a voice I'd never heard speaking like she owned my life while I stood in sawdust and sunlight, looking at my grandfather's 100-year-old cabin. I'd spent 2 years bringing back from the edge, then 3 heavy knocks at the door, and a deputy handed me papers with a shiny blue seal that looked real until you really looked a 7-day clock and a number that made my hands go cold. $65,000 in community fees for a neighborhood I didn't even live in. I'm Noah Grant, restoration contractor, stubborn by nature and practical by trade. And this cabin is the one thing I promised myself I'd finish. Right hand cut. Trim old growth floors, coaxed back to life. Iron hinges I hunted across 3 counties until the pattern matched 1922. The kind of work you can smell and hear if you listen long enough. Cedar and linseed oil, and the old tobacco that still lingers in the walls. So when that envelope said pay or demolition for community safety, I felt the room tilt. But I wasn't about to pay a ransom to people who'd never laid a finger on this place. The deputy did his, "I just serve papers" shrug, left a business card with a number, and 20 minutes later my phone buzzed, and a smooth voice introduced herself as Claudine Renshaw, president of Pine Ridge HOA. Very polite, very helpful, like a teacher explaining a policy to a kid who doesn't read the handbook. She said boundaries had evolved, and a new district map put my cabin squarely in their jurisdiction. There was a community development fee. There was infrastructure burden. There was a desire to resolve this amicably. And there was, of course, a firm deadline. You know what I mean. I asked for the ordinance, the hearing, the signatures she promised, reference numbers, then leaned on consequence and tone the way people do when the facts are thinner than the paper they print them on. So I drove to the county records office with the envelope still warm in my pocket and slid it to the clerk at window 3, who looked at the seal, then at me, then at the seal again, and said, "Ours isn't that shade of blue," and pulled a binder that smelled like dust and ink and proof and unrolled the original plats. 75 charter lines that stopped a mile before my fence. 80 aerial photos with the cabin sitting exactly where it always has. And then she said the quiet part out loud. There had been digital admin updates recently, with no public hearing, someone syncing screens to a story that didn't exist on paper. And if I wanted the whole picture, I should talk to the former archivist Helen Moritz. Helen opened her door like she'd been waiting 5 years for somebody to finally ask the right question. She had a craftsman living room that doubled as a time machine, walls of frames and maps and survey notes. And she didn't waste my time. I signed the first Pine Ridge Charter in 1975, she said. Your family's cabin was never in it, and then she told me the part that made her jaw set. How Claudine had come around calling things corrections. Small digital fixes to match old records. How she'd signed trusting the story. And the person. How families started losing homes. And she realized those quiet corrections had teeth. Then she pulled a metal box from an oak cabinet and set down her husband's survey packets and the old boundary measurements. Tree lines, creek bends. Marks you can still walk, to proof that the nearest HOA lot was a mile off. And she said the line that flipped my whole mood. If you need me to testify, I will. That night, the rain came hard, and I couldn't sleep. And a truck rolled up my gravel drive after midnight. A man stepped into the porch light like he was walking off a job site. Introduced himself as Grant Lewis, civil engineer. The guy who used to do Pine Ridge assessments before he saw what they really were. He said he'd built the framework that let Claudine justify those fees, and he wanted to make it right. He handed me a tablet wrapped in plastic with the real road reports, the parts that didn't make it into their fancy files. Your cabin uses county roads. Your utilities are independent. There is no burden, he said, then told me about Tyler, the technical consultant who massaged valuation algorithms to make numbers lean the way the fees needed. Yeah, that happened. And when I asked if he'd testify, he didn't flinch. By morning, a real estate attorney named Aaron Keene called on a tip from Helen. He'd been collecting cases on Claudine for 2 years and thought my papers might be the linchpin. He laid out a plan, like a carpenter snaps a chalk line. TRO if they sniff at my deed public records to pull every email between Pine Ridge and whoever pushed those uploads, put Helen's ink log against the overlay initials, put Grant's data against Tyler's dashboards, get us on the agenda for the County Planning Commission, and use their precision against them, because people who fake authority leave a trail trying to look official. That week turned me into a one-man records department. Exhibit A through G-Plat maps, GIS screenshots with layer metadata, Helen's pen log with dates and strokes. You can feel the certified mail number from my envelope compared to the county format at the engineers side by side, showing their infrastructure burden numbers, living in a spreadsheet that no agency actually uses. And when I get scared, I get organized. It's how you build a staircase that won't throw you on your face. You line up the risers and keep nailing. Thursday evening, the planning room was packed TV vans outside people from other counties who'd heard about Pine Ridge's slow creep. And there was Claudine in a silver suit with Tyler and 2 briefcases that looked like they'd never seen a scuff. She spoke first with that polished calm that plays well on camera. Called it heritage. Stewardship called it sustainable community. Tyler plugged in, and the screen filled with charts and county logos, and a red zone over my roofline. He said, algorithm. Like it was scripture. He said, model like it was settled. Science. And I watched heads nod because confidence reads like truth when you don't have a map in your lap. When it was our turn, Aaron didn't posture. He put the 1975 charter up and let the lines speak. He put the 1980 aerial up and let the tree lines speak. He put the GIS layer metadata up and asked one question into the hum of the room. Who approved this, and where is that approval recorded? And then, Helen walked to the mics 82 steady. A person who knows exactly what her signature is worth, and she held up her ink log and said, "Those are not my initials," and you could feel the room shift, a degree cooler. Like a cloud had crossed the sun, then Grant explained in simple English how Tyler's analysis pulled numbers from nowhere, how real emergency response costs and road wear don't change because somebody wants a fee to pencil. And a board member asked Tyler what county model he used, and he said the standard one, which doesn't exist. And when Aaron finally put my envelope on the big screen next to a real county notice, the different shade of blue did the heavy lifting. The board asked Claudine for the ordinance behind Addendum 5.3, and she said they could follow up. They asked which staffer approved the overlay, and she said planning, and they asked who specifically, and she didn't have a name. The chair, Rebecca Morrison, cleared her throat, read a motion to find Pine Ridge's overlay. Without legal effect, south of the old boundary to order rescission of any notices based on it, to block any demolition under it, and to refer the matter to the county attorney. Hands went up around the dais. 5 in favor, 2 against the gavel hit wood. And I stopped breathing for a half second, and then let it go. Not a cheer. Not a fist pump, just that quiet release when heavy lifts finally set down. Because that's the moment the power flipped. Not when the TV cameras rolled. Not when somebody later got booked right there. When the room agreed that paper beats polish and process beats swagger. I know some folks want the victory lap, the mug shots and the restitution and the new laws. And some of that came later for other people, and maybe for this county too. But the story I carry ends when the lie lost its microphone, because that's the part any one of us can get to if we stack enough receipts and stand in the right room. You know what I mean? And still, here's the twist that sticks with me. Helen once signed those small fixes believing she was helping. And that's how the slope got slick. A decent person doing a favor for someone who sounded official, so if you're mad, be mad at the system that lets a screen redraw a boundary without a hearing. Be mad at how easy it is to fake a seal and rent authority. Then remember it was a clerk with tired eyes, an archivist with a pen log, an engineer with a conscience, and a lawyer with a calendar who turned the whole thing ordinary people with ordinary tools, who refused to let a spreadsheet become a law. I walked out into air that smelled like rain on warm concrete. Helen squeezed my hand and said her husband would have liked the way the maps lined up. Grant laughed for the first time in weeks. Aaron said, "To keep everything. Because referrals have long shadows." And I drove back to a cabin that finally felt like itself again. The bronze doorknob warm under my palm. The fire scent in the chimney. Not a memory, but a promise. And if you're waiting for a morale, it's simple boundaries. Should be something you can touch, not a color. You can drag with a mouse, and authority should show up with minutes and signatures, not a dashboard and a threat. If you think HOAs protect communities, say so if you've watched a board stretch its reach until it clenched a fist. Tell us what you did. If you've had to pick between paying a fake fee and risking your home. I want to hear how that felt. Drop a comment. Argue about stewardship versus taking. Tell me whether you trust ink or algorithms. Hit like. If this gave you a little spine, hit subscribe. If you want more receipts over rhetoric, and answer me this in the thread. When a committee's gavel says the line is here, not there, where would you draw yours?